I'm Victoria, and honestly, I believed I'd gotten everything just right. 19 years of my life, every additional work shift I picked up, every vacation I cancelled, every pair of sneakers I wore until they fell apart. All of that sacrifice funneled into a single destination. It was Natalie's college fund, my daughter's future, sitting at $187,000. That figure represented my personal victory, concrete evidence that I'd managed to beat the system as a mom raising a kid on her own. Then came that particular morning when I pulled up my banking app and experienced what can only be described as the ground disappearing from under my feet. The joint savings account, the one I'd stupidly maintained with my mother since I turned 20, thinking it would provide security, displayed a balance that read precisely zero. A solitary transaction had drained it, $187,000 taken out by an authorized user. The name attached to that withdrawal belonged to my mom. My hands were trembling uncontrollably as I gripped the steering wheel, driving over to her place. The entire drive, memories of every sacrifice I'd made for that money, replayed in my head like a cruel film. When I finally faced her, my tone came out quiet, but laced with deadly composure. I demanded. She didn't even flinch at my question. Actually, she burst out laughing. "Well, thanks for covering your sister's wedding expenses," she remarked as if it were some amusing joke, as if she hadn't just incinerated my daughter's entire future in one transaction. Then she threw in, almost like an afterthought, "Oh, and Victoria, you won't be getting an invitation. We're keeping it intimate, just close family. I'm sure you get it, right?" The smile that formed on my face felt brittle, like my features might fracture at any second. "Absolutely," I murmured. "I understand completely." Just moments afterward, as I made my way back toward my car, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Dad's name appeared on the screen. When I picked up, the only thing I could hear was the sound of him crying on the other end. His voice was breaking apart. That's when it dawned on me. This situation wasn't simply about stolen money. This was about all the secrets my family had been concealing for years and years. Stay with me through this entire story. Make sure you follow and subscribe, because what's coming is a family revenge that's going to drag out secrets my mom never imagined would ever see daylight. There I sat, parked outside my mother's house, staring blankly at the steering wheel, while my dad wept into the phone. I'd never once heard him sound like that. He managed to choke out. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, my jaw clenched with such intensity it caused physical pain. Quote 7. A pause followed, nothing but the sound of his irregular breathing patterns. Quote 8, he said weakly. Quote 9. His words twisted inside my chest like a blade being turned. Quote 10. Quote 11, I asked in a measured tone. Another lengthy pause followed. Quote 12. He responded, sounding smaller than I'd ever imagined possible. Your mom handled all of it. She always does. I should have asked more questions. I'm deeply sorry, Victoria. I shut my eyes and let my head fall back against the seat. My mother had established that account with me when I was 20, right after Natalie came into the world. Put my name on it as well, she'd insisted back in those days. Utechi quote 15. I was young then, exhausted beyond measure and genuinely grateful. It never crossed my mind that the person I trusted to safeguard the money would end up being the one who stole it. Growing up in my household, money served as my mother's religion. She'd experienced poverty in her youth, constantly reminding us how she'd been forced to fight for every single dollar. But somewhere in her journey, that fear of being poor twisted itself into an obsession centered on control. To her, money wasn't about security anymore. It was purely about power. She made the decisions about who received help and who remained in desperation. I'd witnessed her bail out my younger sister Diana countless times, covering credit card bills, assisting with rent payments, always accompanied by the same justification. Diana just needs a small boost. She's the youngest. As for me, I received lectures about learning to stand on my own feet, And that's exactly what I did. I worked night shifts at the hospital, morning shifts at a tiny cafe when Natalie was small. During the time my mother was purchasing discounted designer bags, I was calculating exactly how many textbooks I could afford that month. So when the realization hit that she'd exploited the joint account loophole to strip nearly $200,000 from my daughter's future and channel it into a wedding I wasn't even invited to attend, something inside me fractured completely. "Dad," I said with deliberate slowness, "were you aware she never intended to invite Natalie or me?" His silence provided a better answer than any words could have. Eventually, he whispered, "She claimed it would create awkwardness with you present. Said you'd make everything about yourself. But Victoria stealing the money, that goes too far." Too far? As if there was some line she'd actually respected prior to this moment. I informed him, my voice now steady. After ending the call, I remained in that driveway for an extended period, observing the curtains in her front window twitching, as if she was still peeking at me, still trying to determine whether I represented a threat she needed to neutralize or a problem she could simply dismiss. For the first time in my life, I looked back at my history and recognized a pattern I'd been too exhausted to identify. Every single time I started building something of my own, she discovered a method to take credit, take control, or take it away entirely. Not this time. Natalie had reached 19. She'd cried tears of joy when she saw her projected college expenses and realized we could actually manage to afford it. How was I supposed to look my daughter in the eye and explain that her grandmother had gambled away her future on flowers, catering services, and a white dress? That night, sleep eluded me. I positioned myself at the kitchen table with my laptop and a notepad, documenting everything I knew about the account, every date, every deposit, every statement. I underlined one particular fact repeatedly. The account had been created specifically for Natalie's education. I had the emails, the paper trail. My mother might possess the money at this moment, but I had something she'd never taken into consideration: evidence. And for the first time, my thinking shifted, no longer like a scared daughter, but like a woman preparing herself for war. If you found yourself in my position, would you confront your mother again, or head straight to a lawyer first? The following morning, I dragged my body to work on complete autopilot, my physical self going through the motions at the hospital, while my mind kept replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my mother regarding family obligations. During breaks between patients, I caught myself staring at the clock, counting down minutes until I could speak with the one person who had never once made me feel insignificant: Vincent. Vincent wasn't Natalie's biological father, but he'd entered our lives as if he'd always been meant to be there. He was aware of the joint account. He knew exactly how long I'd been saving. When he entered my kitchen that evening carrying takeout bags and wearing a worried expression, I didn't even attempt to appear strong. I revealed everything to him. My mother's laugh, her dismissive quote, 22. My dad's tearful phone call. Vincent sat in silence as I spoke, his hands folded, his jaw growing tighter. When I finished, he released a slow breath. "All right," he said. "This is bad, but it's not without hope." I released a bitter laugh. "She took everything, Vincent. How is that not hopeless?" He tapped the table surface between us. "Because you didn't just toss money into a box under her bed. You have records. You have documentation proving this was intended as a college fund for Natalie. That matters significantly." He had a point. I'd preserved every bank statement, every email confirmation from when I transferred money into that account. At the time, it was simply my method of keeping track. Now, it represented a trail of evidence. Vincent said, leaning in closer. I blinked in surprise. He gave me a meaningful look. Quote, 30. The word, quote, 31, hung suspended in the air between us. My mother, who loved boasting about her reputation and respectability at church and within the community, potentially being investigated for fraud. I couldn't deny the small, vicious spark of satisfaction that ignited in my chest. Still, part of me hesitated. "She's my mom," I whispered. "Do I genuinely want to drag her into court?" Vincent's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. Quote, 34. That evening, we spread my documents across the dining table. Old statements dating back to when Natalie was in diapers. Notes in my handwriting marking additional deposits. House, quote, 35. House, quote, 36. Quote, 37. Every dollar carried a story. Every story concluded in the same place. My mother's smirking face thanking me for financing a wedding I was excluded from. I pulled up the online banking portal once more and examined the transaction details. The withdrawal had been processed at the branch where my mother knew every teller by their first name. She probably walked in with a smile, spinning some charming narrative about helping her struggling daughter manage her finances. The thought made my stomach turn. Do you think she acted on her own? I asked Vincent. Or do you think Diana and Brandon are aware? He considered that carefully. My guess is Diana knows the money originated from you in some vague way, but your mom probably framed it as Victoria is helping pay for the wedding. She owes the family. As for Brandon, if he's as smart and as involved in finances as you've mentioned, he might know more than he's letting on. I swallowed hard. So I'm up against my own mother and a future son-in-law who understands how to hide money, I muttered. Perfect. Or, Vincent countered, you're up against two people who think you're too soft to fight back. That's their miscalculation. Before going to bed, I texted my dad. Dad, I need you to tell me everything Mom said about that account. Dates, specific phrases, anything. This is serious. He replied with just one sentence. Whatever you decide, I'll back you this time. This time? The implication stung deeply. All those times he hadn't supported me. All those times he'd chosen silence because confronting the woman he lived with was easier. But I clung to that small promise. I needed allies, even imperfect ones. As I lay in bed next to a sleeping Natalie, watching her peaceful face, a new variety of anger settled deep into my bones. Not the wild, frantic rage from earlier, but something sharper, colder, more calculated. My mother believed she'd won. She thought I'd scream, cry, then eventually move forward because family is more important than money. She had absolutely no idea that this time I was going to ensure her actions had consequences she couldn't charm her way out of. If someone you loved stole everything you'd built for your child, would you still worry about protecting their reputation? 3 days afterward, I took a personal day from the hospital and entered the bank that had held my savings hostage for nearly 2 decades. Vincent accompanied me, not saying much, just providing a steady presence at my side. The lobby carried the scent of polished wood and printer ink, identical to every other bank I'd ever visited. But today, the atmosphere felt heavier. When we sat down with the branch manager, I spread out my folder of documents on his desk. I began, my voice steady. I slid a highlighted statement across the desk displaying the final balance before the withdrawal. Quote, 49. The manager adjusted his glasses, scanning through the papers. Quote, 50. He said carefully. Quote, 51. I nodded. I'd anticipated that speech. I understand that, I replied, but I wanted on record that this was done against the intent and understanding of the person who funded the account. I want every detail of that withdrawal. Who approved it? What ID was shown? What was said at the counter? He hesitated briefly, then logged into his system. After several minutes, he printed a report and handed it to me. The withdrawal was done in person by Linda, he said. She presented her ID and signed the form. It was processed as a legitimate transaction. No surprise there. My mother knew how to play by the rules just enough to avoid suspicion. Can you at least provide a notarized statement summarizing this? I asked. That she withdrew the funds from a joint account funded by me? The manager looked between me and Vincent, then nodded. Yes, I can do that. As he prepared the document, Vincent squeezed my hand under the table. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a piece of the puzzle. That afternoon, we met with a lawyer recommended by one of Vincent's co-workers. Her name was Patricia, and she possessed the calm, sharp gaze of someone who'd witnessed every variety of family disaster. After listening to my story and flipping through my evidence, she leaned back in her chair. Quote 59, she said. My heart sank. Then she continued. Quote 60, quote 61. I asked. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. To quote 62. The idea of my mother facing criminal charges left a bitter taste in my mouth. I wasn't certain if I wanted her in handcuffs. I just wanted Natalie's future back. I asked. Patricia's eyes sharpened. Good. That gives us leverage. If we can prove that wedding vendors were paid from those funds, we establish a direct line from your savings to their event. Judges don't appreciate seeing someone blow through money that isn't theirs on luxuries. On the drive home, Vincent and I sat in thoughtful silence. Finally, he said, "You know, if Brandon's involved in tracking finances for the wedding, we might not need to guess. We might be able to get invoices, transfers, even emails tying him and your mom together on this." "How?" I asked. "He'll never just hand those over." Vincent shrugged. "Maybe not willingly, but people talk. Vendors talk. And your dad? He might know more than he realizes." That evening, I called my dad again. This time I asked specific questions. When had my mother started talking about helping with the wedding? Did she mention amounts? Had she ever stated where the money was coming from in exact terms? He hesitated repeatedly, clearly torn between loyalty and guilt. "She said you weren't really using the account," he finally admitted. "Said you were too practical to mind helping your sister. She kept saying, Victoria will still figure something out for Natalie. She always does." My chest burned. My mother had turned my reliability into a weapon against me. She counted on me being the responsible one, the one who would figure something out, no matter what chaos she unleashed. After I hung up, I went to Natalie's room. She was sitting at her desk, scrolling through college websites. I leaned against the doorway, suddenly unsure how to tell her. I said softly. Quote 74. She turned, her eyes bright. Quote 75. The words lodged in my throat. I sat on the edge of her bed. Quote 76. I told her the truth, every ugly detail. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. She whispered. I nodded, feeling my own eyes sting. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She just said in a small, shaken voice, quote 80, quote. That sentence broke something in me that my mother could never fix. That night, Natalie fell asleep with her laptop still open to a picture of the campus she'd always wanted. I closed it gently and went back to the table where my documents lay. My mother had made a choice. Now I would make mine. If you were Natalie, would you ever trust your grandmother again after something like this? The weeks leading up to Diana's wedding felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Everywhere I looked, social media, extended family group chats, even random conversations at the grocery store. Someone was discussing the big day. Photos of floral arrangements, venue sneak peeks, and dress fittings floated through my feeds like confetti. I blocked the group chats, muted half my contacts, but the wedding still seeped into my life like smoke seeping under a door. My mother didn't reach out. Neither did Diana. The silence from their side was almost louder than the gossip I heard from everyone else. My dad, however, called more frequently. Sometimes just to check on Natalie, sometimes to awkwardly ask how things were progressing with that lawyer. The guilt in his voice was constant. One evening, he let something slip that made my heart stop. "Your mom was bragging to one of the relatives," he said quietly. "She said something like, 'At least the wedding is fully covered.' My girls might not always be grateful, but they'll thank me one day." I gripped the phone tighter. "Did she say how it was covered?" He sighed. "She said Victoria's savings were just sitting there. Better to use them for something beautiful than let them gather dust. She said it like she was doing you a favor." Something beautiful. My daughter's education reduced to centerpieces and a DJ. With Patricia's guidance, we focused on building a clear chain between the stolen money and the wedding. Vincent helped me compile a spreadsheet tracking every large payment my mother had made in the months leading up to the withdrawal. The pattern was obvious: big transfers to vendors, often just days after deposits from my paychecks. When Patricia saw the spreadsheet, her eyebrows rose. "Judges love patterns," she said, "and they really love clear timelines. This is good." We also started quietly reaching out to vendors. I posed as a family member helping coordinate finances and asked for duplicate invoices for my records. You'd be amazed how quickly people will email you sensitive information if you sound just stressed and polite enough. One florist even forwarded a message thread between my mother and Diana where my mother wrote, quote, 888. That email became Exhibit A. Meanwhile, Natalie grew quieter. She kept her grades up, still went to school, still worked her part-time job, but she avoided any conversation that involved the future. One night, I found her deleting college newsletters from her inbox unread. I said softly. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Quote 91. My heart twisted. Quote 92. She looked up at me, eyes red. Quote 93. She whispered. Quote 94. I had no easy answer, so I told her the only truth I could offer. Quote 95. Around that time, word began to spread in the family that, quote 96. An aunt texted me, quote 97, with a shocked emoji. I replied, quote 98. She didn't respond, but a cousin did. Good, he wrote. Someone needed to stand up to her years ago. The wedding RSVP never came for me or Natalie. Officially, we were ghosts, uninvited, erased. But I had no intention of staying away. Not because I wanted to ruin a party, but because that was the one place everyone involved would be in the same room. My mother, my sister, Brandon, extended family, all the people who had quietly benefited from my silence for years. I didn't tell many people my plan, only Vincent, Patricia, and eventually my dad. When I told him I was going to confront Mom at the wedding with evidence, his first reaction was panic. Quote 101, he said. Quote 103. I replied calmly. Quote 104. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked in a tired voice, quote 105. Quote 106. I said, quote 107. As the wedding day crept closer, the nervousness in my stomach battled with a cold, focused rage in my chest. I printed every document Patricia said might matter. Bank statements, screenshots of the account history, highlighted invoices from vendors, and that horrifying email about my, quote, 108 being used for something fun. I slid them into a neat folder and slipped it into my bag. On the morning of the wedding, as I zipped up a simple dress, nothing flashy, nothing that could be twisted into jealousy, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized something. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore, begging for crumbs of approval. I was a mother about to walk into a room full of people who thought they knew the story and show them the real one. If your entire family was gathered to celebrate while your future was being burned as fuel for their happiness, would you walk away quietly or walk in with the truth? The venue looked like something straight out of a magazine. White chairs in perfect rows, fairy lights wrapped around trees, flowers cascading from every possible surface. It was the kind of wedding people posted about for weeks. As Vincent and I walked up the path, I could feel eyes following us. We weren't supposed to be there. That was exactly why I'd come. My dad met us near the entrance, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes tired. "You look beautiful," he said, voice strained. "Thank you for coming." "You might not be saying that later," I replied, managing a small, humorless smile. He swallowed hard. "I'll tell the truth if anyone asks me direct questions," he promised. "I owe you that much." The ceremony itself was a blur. I watched from the back as Diana walked down the aisle, in a dress that probably cost more than my car, her face glowing as if the world had never handed her a consequence. My mother sat in the front row, chin lifted, radiating satisfaction. I stared at the back of her head, thinking of the email where she joked about my savings. My fingers tightened around the folder in my lap. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. I clapped too, but not for the same reasons. I wasn't celebrating their union. I was acknowledging the moment before everything changed. At the reception, the music was loud, the food was lavish, and the bar was open. People laughed, danced, made toasts. My mother moved around the room like a queen at court, accepting compliments on how spectacular everything was. She didn't notice me at first, tucked near the edge of the room with Vincent and my dad. "You don't have to do this," Vincent murmured beside me. "Yes," I said quietly, "I do." The DJ invited everyone to quiet down for speeches. Diana and Brandon took their seats at the front table, flanked by my mother and a few close friends. The best man spoke, then the maid of honor. Laughter, clinking glasses, tears. Then the DJ said, "If anyone else would like to share a few words, now's the time." I stood up. The room shifted. Conversations paused. A few whispers rippled through the crowd. I walked toward the center with my heart pounding in my ears, but my steps never faltered. "I'd like to say something," I said, taking the microphone. The DJ, sensing drama, handed it over with a grin. My mother's smile froze on her face when she saw me. "Quote, 119 quote," she said through her teeth. "Quote, 120. Quote, 121. I replied calmly. Quote, 122. A hush fell over the room. I could feel 100 eyes on me. Diana shifted uncomfortably, glancing at our mother. Brandon's expression tightened. "Victoria, stop!" my mother snapped, her voice dripping with warning. "Don't ruin your sister's day." I opened my folder and held up the first page. A bank statement, enlarged and printed clearly. 19 years ago, I began. I opened a savings account in my name and my mother's name. It was meant to protect money for my daughter's college education. Every overtime shift I worked, every tax refund, every extra dollar went into that fund. I walked slowly as I spoke, letting the pages catch the light as I flipped. 5 days ago, that account had $187,000 in it. Then one transaction, a full withdrawal, processed by Linda. I pointed the paper at my mother. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother's face had gone pale, but she tried to recover. She hissed. I said softly but clearly. Quote, 131. I held up another page, an invoice from the venue marked, quote, 132. Quote, 133. Another paper, the florist's email thread, printed and highlighted. I read aloud. "Don't worry about the cost, darling. Your sister's college stash is finally good for something fun." "That's what you wrote, Mom." The room erupted into whispers. Someone near the back muttered, "Oh my God." Brandon stood slowly, eyes fixed on the document. "Is this real?" he asked, voice tight. "You used your granddaughter's college fund for our wedding?" My mother's mask finally cracked. Quote, 139. She snapped. Quote, 140. Natalie, standing beside Vincent near the back, made a small wounded sound. My chest burned. Quote, 141. I said, my voice shaking now, not from fear, but from fury. Quote, 142. I turned to the room. Quote, 143. Brandon looked sick. Quote, 144. He said slowly. Quote, 145. She tried to brush it off. Quote, 146. His jaw clenched. Quote, 147. And that word. Quote, 148. Hung in the air like a verdict. My dad stepped forward then, voice trembling but clear. Quote, 149, he said. Quote, 150. The room shifted again. Now eyes looked at my mother with something sharper than curiosity, judgment, disgust. Diana's face crumpled. "Mom, is that why you told me not to invite Victoria, so she wouldn't find out?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time, she looked cornered, fragile, small. "I did what I had to," she whispered. "I'm the only one who ever thinks about this family." "No," I said, dropping the last paper onto the table in front of her, a copy of the preliminary complaint Patricia had drafted ready to file. "You're the only one who thinks your desires matter more than anyone else's future." Most people would have stopped there, but I wasn't most people. Not anymore. I looked at Natalie, at Vincent, at my dad, then at the guests. I said. Then I handed the microphone back to the DJ, who looked stunned. For a moment, the room was frozen. Then everything fractured at once. Voices rising, chairs scraping, Diana crying, Brandon shouting quietly at my mother. The fairy lights still glowed. The music was still playing faintly in the background, but the illusion was shattered. If you were standing in that room, would you side with the woman who paid for your champagne or the one who paid with her child's future? I walked out of the reception hall into the cool evening air, my hands still trembling as adrenaline slowly leaked out of my system. Vincent caught up to me first, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "You didn't scream. You didn't fall apart. You just told the truth." Behind us, the chaos continued. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, someone crying loudly. Probably Diana. I didn't turn around. For the first time in days, the knot in my chest loosened. A moment later, Natalie reached me. Her eyes were red, but she looked lighter. Quote, 160, she said, almost in awe. Quote, 161. I replied. Quote, 162. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Quote, 163, she whispered. Quote, 164. In the days that followed, the fallout was brutal. My mother called me once, leaving a voicemail full of accusations. I was ungrateful, dramatic, cruel for humiliating her. She insisted she'd only ever tried to help and that family shouldn't drag each other into court. I saved the voicemail. Patricia smiled when she heard it. Quote, 165, quote, she said. Quote, 166, quote. Brandon, on the other hand, called to apologize. Quote, 167, he said earnestly. Quote, 168. I believed him, mostly because he'd spent the reception looking like he wanted to crawl under the table. What happens now? I asked. The wedding's already happened. The money's gone. Not all of it, he said, surprising me. Some vendors haven't been fully paid yet, and if your case goes through, well, Linda might not be the only one facing questions about financial misrepresentation. There it was again, that hint that this could bleed into criminal territory. A few weeks later, the lawsuit was filed officially. Victoria versus Linda, seeking restitution of the $187,000 plus damages for emotional distress and unjust enrichment. The family chat exploded when the notice reached my mother's mailbox. Half the relatives took her side immediately, parroting her lines about airing dirty laundry and disrespect. The other half stayed silent publicly but sent me private messages. Quote, 173. One cousin confessed. Another wrote, quote, 174. My dad ended up staying with a friend for a while. That's quote, 175. How? He told me. Quote, 176. I didn't know what would happen to their marriage, but for the first time, I believe my dad might finally choose peace over proximity. Mediation was tense. My mother arrived in a carefully chosen outfit, her hair immaculate, her eyes cold. She looked smaller somehow, though, like some of the air had leaked out of her ego since the wedding. She offered a partial settlement at first, trying to spin it as a misunderstanding. I'll return some of the money over time, interest-free, she said. We can work out a schedule. No need to drag this through court. Patricia's voice was smooth but unyielding. Quote 179, she replied. Tito, quote 180. My mother kept glancing at me as if waiting for me to fold, to soften, to say, I didn't. Eventually, when the mediator left the room briefly, she leaned forward and whispered, You're really willing to destroy your own mother over money? I met her eyes steadily. You destroyed my daughter's future over a party, I said. This isn't about money anymore. It's about consequences. In the end, faced with the strength of our documentation and the looming threat of a judge who might be far less patient with her than a mediator, she caved. The settlement required her to liquidate some assets, take out a loan, and downsize her lifestyle dramatically. The house she'd once bragged about at every family gathering went on the market. The designer handbags disappeared. She cried publicly about her ungrateful daughter forcing her into financial ruin, but privately she paid. Every payment was wired into a dedicated account under my name only, with Natalie as the sole beneficiary upon turning 22. This time, there were no joint signatures, no loopholes, no room for misunderstandings. The first time I logged into the new account and saw the balance climbing back up, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself in weeks: hope. It would take time and interest and careful planning, but there was a real chance Natalie could still go to the school she dreamed of. When I told her the case was settled, she stared at me for a long moment. So she had to sell her house, the one she always bragged about? I nodded. Actions have consequences, I said. even for grandmothers. Natalie was quiet, then said softly, I don't feel sorry for her. Is that bad? I shook my head. No, that's honest. Months later, standing on Natalie's future campus for an orientation visit, I watched her turn in a slow circle, taking in the buildings, the energy, the buzzing possibility in the air. We're really doing this, she breathed. After everything, I'm actually here. I squeezed her hand. You are, I said, because you earned it. And because this time, we didn't let someone else decide what you were worth. As for my relationship with my mother, it never really recovered. We went low contact, polite messages on holidays, occasional updates passed through my dad. She still tells anyone who will listen that I took her to court over a misunderstanding. But the people who matter know the truth, and more importantly, so do I. I used to think being a good daughter meant absorbing harm and calling it love, forgiving without boundaries, sacrificing until there was nothing left. Now I know better. Being a good mother meant standing up to my own mother to protect my child. Even when it was messy, even when it hurt, even when people judged, especially then. If your parents showed you over and over again that their comfort matters more than your future, would you keep forgiving? Or would you finally teach them what consequences feel like?